Imagine trying to solve a, well, a pretty brutal murder inside a massive church. Like, the heavy oak doors are locked tight from the outside, you know?
Right, and the only person with the keys claims the killer must have just, I don't know, vanished into thin air.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, it sounds exactly like the plot of an Agatha Christie novel. Just this perfectly contained puzzle waiting for some brilliant detective to, like, reveal a hidden panel or something.
Yeah, but the thing is, in 1974, this wasn't fiction. It was a terrifying, completely chaotic reality at Stanford University.
Yeah. And when a real-world crime presents this kind of impossible scenario, the boundaries of logic just sort of fail.
They absolutely do. I mean, we crave answers so deeply that when the truth stays hidden, the human mind will just invent these truly extraordinary and honestly sometimes really dangerous alternatives to fill the void.
Which brings us to what you are stepping into today. We're looking at a case that starts as that classic locked room mystery and then just spirals. It spirals into one of the most astonishing true crime detours in American history. It really does. We are diving into the 1974 murder of 19-year-old Arlis Perry.
The only way to really understand how a single unsolved crime could eventually trigger a nationwide panic is to look at the environment Arlis Perry was navigating.
Right, setting the scene.
Exactly. We need to examine the psychological baseline of the Stanford campus in the early 1970s.
And looking at the university archives from that 1973 to 1974 academic year, they paint a picture of a campus experiencing this profound duality. I like to think of it like watching a split-screen movie.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because on one side of the screen, you have this sunny, world-class academic bubble that's just bursting with progress. I mean, the Native American Cultural Center and the Gay People's Union were establishing their first dedicated spaces on campus.
Right. Huge milestones.
Yeah, and the structured liberal education program, which was this massive, innovative humanities initiative, was really taking off. You even had a Stanford alum, Owen Garriott, literally orbiting the Earth on the Skylab space station.
So human knowledge was literally reaching for the stars at this point.
Exactly.
Yet, running parallel to all that optimism was this really grim, creeping reality. I mean, within an 18-month span, 4 members of the Stanford community were murdered.
4 people in 18 months.
Yeah, on or immediately adjacent to university land. You had Leslie Marie Perloff, who was found strangled in the nearby foothills. David Levine was stabbed near the Meyer Library.
God, that's awful.
And then Janet Ann Taylor was strangled on Sand Hill Road. And then finally came Arlis Perry.
Just imagine trying to exist in that space for a second. You know, you are a student, you're stressing over midterms and term papers, but you are acutely aware that an entirely male, completely under-equipped campus police force is just failing to stop a string of brutal killings right outside your dorm window.
Right, the dread would be completely suffocating.
It creates a community living on a nice edge, you know?
It does. And the psychological toll of knowing there's an active predator in your immediate vicinity, it fundamentally alters human behavior.
Yeah.
You constantly look over your shoulder, you evaluate every shadow.
You second-guess every interaction.
Exactly. And that atmosphere of high alert really sets the stage for the night of October 12, 1974.
So let's zoom in on the timeline of that night. And I gotta say, what makes the inciting incident of this specific tragedy so heartbreaking is just its sheer mundanity.
It really was just a normal evening.
Yeah. Arlis and her husband, Bruce Perry, they were high school sweethearts from Bismarck, North Dakota. They had just moved to California, so Bruce could take pre-med classes.
They were just 19-year-old newlyweds.
Right. So around 11:30 p.m., they took a walk to a campus mailbox, and they got into an argument.
And it was over something completely trivial, too. They were arguing about whether to check the air pressure in their car's tires.
Just a petty disagreement that happens in literally every marriage.
Yeah.
But Arlis got upset, and she told Bruce she wanted to go to Stanford Memorial Church to pray and just cool off.
So Bruce went back to their campus residence, and Arlis walked alone to the church.
And from that moment, the timeline is entirely dependent on the campus security guard on duty, a man named Stephen Crawford.
Right. So according to his official log, Crawford locked the massive outer doors of the church just after midnight.
Okay.
He claimed he then completed his rounds across campus and returned to recheck those specific doors at 2 a.m., and he logged that they were still perfectly secure.
Okay, so by 3 a.m., Bruce is back at their apartment, and he is panicking. Arlis hasn't come home. So he calls the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office.
And deputies actually go out to the church.
They do. They check the exterior, and they find the doors firmly locked from the outside. There is no sign of forced entry anywhere. So assuming Arlis went somewhere else, they just leave.
Which brings us to 5:45 a.m. Stephen Crawford arrives to unlock the church for the morning services. Shortly after, he calls the police, claiming he has discovered Arlis's body near the altar.
And he offers a really specific detail to the arriving officers, doesn't he?
He does. He claims a side door on the west side of the building had been forced open from the inside.
From the inside. Okay, well, the scene inside that church was just horrific. I mean, Arlis had been strangled and assaulted with a candlestick and an ice pick.
It was incredibly brutal.
She was naked from the waist down, and the killer had deliberately placed heavy altar candles across her body to make the scene look like ritualistic.
Yeah, it was very staged.
And amidst the chaos of discovering all this, investigators also had to deal with this really bizarre coincidence.
Oh, right, the phone calls from North Dakota.
Yes.
Oh.
Arlis's best friend and Bruce's mother were desperately trying to call the young couple, but the campus operator kept connecting them to the wrong person.
Because there was another student at Stanford named Bruce Duncan Perry.
Exactly. He was also newly married, but his wife obviously wasn't Arlis. It was just this eerie, confusing hurdle for families who were thousands of miles away trying to get information.
Right, I can't even imagine that panic. But once the police finally entangled the identities, their focus naturally narrowed to the two men most closely tied to the physical timeline, right? The husband, Bruce, and the security guard, Stephen Crawford.
Okay, wait, I have to pause the narrative right here, because I really need to push back on the investigation's logic.
Go for it.
So Crawford calls the police. He says, I found the body, and look, this door was forced open from the inside. But wait, the police had already checked the building at 3 a.m.
Right, and it was locked from the outside.
Exactly. If Crawford found the door forced from the inside, the killer would have had to vanish, lock the heavy main doors from the exterior without a key, and leave the interior door looking forced. I mean, shouldn't that physical impossibility have immediately flagged him as the prime suspect? He was the only one with the keys.
Oh, detective absolutely saw the exact same gaping hole in his story. The logic completely pointed to Crawford. But we have to understand the severe limitations of criminal forensics in 1974.
Right. It wasn't like CSI today.
Not at all. A physically impossible story makes someone a prime suspect, sure, but it does not meet the burden of proof for a murder conviction in a court of law. Investigators had physical evidence. They had a palm print on one of the candles and semen left on a kneeling pillow and on Arlis's jeans.
But they lacked the scientific tools to decode it. They couldn't just, run a DNA swab.
Exactly. DNA profiling for criminal cases wouldn't be invented for another decade. In the mid-70s, forensic serology relied on basic ABO blood typing and checking for what's called secretor status.
Secretor status. Okay, what is that?
So a secretor is someone whose blood type antigens appear in their bodily fluids, like saliva or semen. But the catch is about 80% of the population are secretors.
Oh, wow. So it's super common.
Very common. So when the lab tested the semen from the crime scene, they could only determine a general blood type. It didn't definitively match Crawford, but it also didn't completely exclude him, or Bruce Perry for that matter.
So it was just a blunt instrument that left the case completely legally paralyzed.
Precisely.
Wow. So Crawford is ruled out purely because the science of the era couldn't confirm what the detectives' common sense was just screaming at them. The local police essentially hit a brick wall.
And we all know what happens when official authorities cannot provide an answer to a horrifying, seemingly ritualistic murder in a prominent church.
The public imagination takes over. The story gets dragged from the quiet Stanford campus all the way into the orbit of a notorious New York serial killer.
Yes, David Berkowitz, known to the world as the Son of Sam.
Right. So a few years after Arlis was murdered, Berkowitz was sitting in a New York prison cell, having been convicted of killing 6 people. And out of nowhere, he sends a package to a police investigator back in North Dakota.
And the package contains a book about witchcraft and this cryptic, terrifying note.
Yeah, the note explicitly references Arlis. It states, and I quote, Arlis Perry, hunted, stalked, and slain, followed to California, Stanford Univ.
Which is where a journalist named Mari Terry intercepts this thread. And what's fascinating here is how Terry wove it into this elaborate, sprawling theory.
He really went all in.
He did.
Hmm?
Terry became convinced that Berkowitz did not act alone in New York. He hypothesized that the Son of Sam was actually part of a nationwide underground satanic network called the Children. The Children.
Okay.
Yeah, and according to Terry, this network had tentacles reaching all the way to the Manson family in California.
Okay, wait. I'm trying to connect the dots here. Isn't it highly likely that Berkowitz was just an incarcerated serial killer manipulating the media for attention? I mean, how does a 19-year-old college sophomore from Bismarck, North Dakota, become a target for a vast underground satanic cult operating out of New York?
Well, Terry's theory hinged on a man named John Carr. Carr was a neighbor of Berkowitz in New York, and Terry believed he was a high-ranking member of this cult.
Okay, but how does Arlis fit into that?
Terry claimed that Arlis Perry had uncovered a dark secret. He said she somehow had information regarding John Carr's death. And to keep her quiet, the cult allegedly tracked her across the country, cornered her in Stanford Memorial Church, and executed her in a ritualistic silencing.
Wow.
Yeah, Terry published this entire theory in a best-selling book titled The Ultimate Evil, and it completely captivated the country.
I mean, I get why it sounds like a Hollywood script, but there is a massive problem with the timeline here. How could Arlis know a secret about John Carr's death?
She couldn't. And this is exactly where Terry's elaborate theory just collapses completely under its own weight. John Carr died in a shooting in North Dakota in 1978. Arlis Perry was murdered in California in 1974.
Hold on. So she was allegedly murdered to cover up a death that wouldn't happen for another 4 years.
Precisely. The chronology is physically impossible.
That's absurd.
It is. Leading authorities and cold case experts widely agree now that Berkowitz was simply an incarcerated, narcissistic killer manipulating the media. He likely read about the unsolved Stanford murder in the news, recognized the shock value, and just folded it into his own mythology to keep his name in the headlines.
It's a textbook case of a serial killer desperate for relevance. But that begs the question, why did so many people, including established journalists and law enforcement officials, buy into this satanic cult theory for decades? I mean, The Ultimate Evil sold incredibly well. People really wanted to believe it.
It functions as a profound psychological defense mechanism. You have to remember, the 1970s was an era defined by social upheaval, the aftermath of the Manson murders, and just a growing cultural anxiety in general.
Right, everyone was already on edge.
Exactly. So when society is faced with a crime as brutal and senseless as the murder of a young woman praying in a church, the human brain rejects the randomness of it.
It's too scary to accept.
Yes. The reality that a friendly, mundane neighborhood security guard could just snap and commit an act of unimaginable violence is terrifying, because it means danger is unpredictable. It means evil is banal and exists right in our everyday routines.
So a nationwide satanic cult provides a much cleaner narrative.
It gives the violent structure. It turns a random tragedy into a battle between good and an organized cinematic evil. People find this twisted comfort in the idea of a comic book villain orchestrating events from the shadows.
Rather than accepting that the guy who smiles and waves while locking the building at night is actually a monster. We want the monsters to look like monsters. We don't want them to look like Stephen Crawford. But thankfully, the narrative eventually shifts away from true crime paperbacks and sensationalism, and it moves back into the realm of hard science. We jump forward over 40 years to 2018.
Because science had finally caught up to the evidence preserved in 1974.
Investigators took the semen left on Arlis's genes, and they applied advanced forensic genetic genealogy to it, which, by the way, is the exact same technology that was used to identify the Golden State Killer.
The mechanics of genetic genealogy are just fascinating. Investigators don't just look for a direct match in a criminal database anymore.
Right, because the killer might not be in there.
Exactly. They take the DNA profile built from the 1974 crime scene and upload it to public ancestry and genealogy databases, the exact same websites everyday people use to find distant relatives. By searching those databases, they locate a partial match, maybe a third or fourth cousin of the killer.
And from there, it's incredibly meticulous detective work.
Oh, absolutely. They build massive family trees backward, tracing lineage through census records, birth certificates, and obituaries, finding the common ancestors of those cousins.
Wow.
Then they trace every branch of the family forward to the present day, looking for a male relative who was of the right age and in the right geographic location at the time of the murder.
And following that genetic breadcrumb trail, the tree pointed directly to one man, Stephen Crawford.
The security guard.
The security guard who told the physically impossible story about the locked door. The science finally proved what the detective's logic suspected on day one. So in June of 2018, Santa Clara County detectives arrive at Crawford's apartment in San Jose armed with a search warrant.
They finally had him.
They knock on the door. Crawford answers, sees the police, and immediately stalls. He tells the deputies he just needs a minute to put some clothes on.
But the detectives wait, though they already have a master key to his apartment from the property manager.
Right. And realizing Crawford is stalling, they use the key and enter. They find Crawford sitting on the edge of his bed, holding a handgun. The deputies quickly back out of the room to establish a perimeter, and moments later, they hear a single gunshot.
He shot himself.
Crawford shot himself in the head, evading formal justice at the very last possible second.
He escaped a trial, sure, but the search of his apartment painted a deeply chilling portrait of his psychology. The items detectives cataloged reveal a man driven by a toxic need for possession and status.
They found a suicide note that Crawford had drafted 2 full years prior. So he knew cold case detectives had been asking questions, and he was preparing his exit strategy.
But they also found a doctored Stanford University diploma bearing his name. And the thing is, Crawford never graduated from Stanford.
That fake diploma speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. He harbored this bizarre, deep-seated desire to be seen as a legitimate part of that elite academic world. He didn't just want to guard the university, he felt entitled to its prestige. And this entitlement was further proven by a previous arrest. In 1992, Crawford was caught methodically stealing from Stanford. He had been lifting incredibly valuable rare books and Native American bronze statues from the anthropology department. He eventually pleaded no contest to receiving stolen property.
He treated the university as his personal hunting ground. He felt entirely justified in taking things of immense value that he had not earned, whether it was a rare bronze statue or, devastatingly, the life of a 19-year-old woman.
Exactly.
But of all the things in his apartment, there was one discovery that truly stops you in your tracks.
Oh, yes. Detectives found the torn-off cover of a book, specifically the cover of Maury Terry's book, The Ultimate Evil.
The very book that popularized the nationwide theory that the son of Sam Colt had murdered Arlis Perry.
Yeah.
We will explore the implications of that in a moment, but contrasting Crawford's selfish entitlement with the profound deprivation experienced by Arlis's family is vital here. The human toll of this crime stretched across decades.
It did. When the news of the DNA match in Crawford's suicide broke in 2018, Arlis's mother, Jean, was 88 years old.
Wow, 88.
She spoke to reporters and expressed a quiet relief, but the timing carried a crushing weight. Her husband, Arlis's father, Marvin, had passed away just 3 months before the police knocked on Crawford's door.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking. Jean said her husband had been utterly possessed by the need to know who took his daughter's life. He waited 43 years for an answer, and he missed the resolution by 90 days.
It's tragedy.
A lifetime of agonizing grief, compounded by the noise of national media and false cult conspiracies.
Yeah.
And all while the man responsible was quietly living an hour away in San Jose.
It's hard to even wrap your head around.
So what does this all mean? We look at a tragedy that was hijacked for decades by true crime authors trying to sell paperbacks. But the answer wasn't found by decoding cryptic letters from a serial killer or uncovering a vast, underground occult network.
Right. It was found through the quiet, relentless patience of science and detectives who refused to let the physical evidence decay in an evidence locker.
It is a powerful lesson in the principle of Occam's razor. For those unfamiliar, Occam's razor is this philosophical principle stating that when you are presented with competing explanations for an event, the simplest one, the one that requires the fewest assumptions, is usually the correct one.
The simplest answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The man who was at the crime scene, who had the keys to the church, and who told a physically impossible story about a locked door, he was the killer. It took half a lifetime for forensic science to catch up and prove what basic logic dictated from the very start.
And it grounds us, you know. In an era where internet sleuths and elaborate theories constantly compete for our attention, the truth is often much closer to home and much more mundane than we want to believe.
It forces us to confront the reality of hard facts over sensationalism. But as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering question regarding that torn-off book cover found in the killer's apartment. We know Stephen Crawford kept the cover of The Ultimate Evil.
Yeah.
Why did he have it? Did he hold on to it because, as the conspiracy theorists claimed, he actually was a peripheral player in some dark underground occult network? Or, and perhaps this is infinitely more chilling, did he keep it as a sick private trophy?
That's a terrifying thought.
Just imagine Stephen Crawford sitting in his apartment for decades, secretly reveling in the fact that the entire country was wasting its time blaming a mythical satanic cult for a brutal, senseless crime that he committed alone behind a locked church door.